Hey guys, welcome to another episode of GameHammer Daily, and today we've got a very nice one for you. It's Bonanza Brothers, and we're going to look at several versions of it. Let's get straight into it. One of the last games I ever bought for my Amstrad CPC during its commercial life was Bonanza Brothers. Released by US Gold in 1991, it was a faithful port of the Sega arcade game that had been released the year before. The premise of the game is simple. Player 1 plays as Robo, a tall robot dressed in red, while Player 2, if there is one, plays as Mobo, a shorter robot dressed in blue. Together, or alone if you're only playing one player, you must infiltrate various buildings and steal a number of items while dodging the numerous guards who patrol the area. On later levels, there are also items strewn around the floor of each level, which will trip you up if you step on them. Once you have all the items that you need to pilfer, you have to head to the designated exit point on the roof, where a hot air balloon will descend to allow you to make your escape. You're doing all of this because apparently some bloke spoke to you through your TV set and asked you to test his security, which I'm sure is not an excuse that will hold up in court. As arcade games go, this one is a very simple, very straightforward action game with rudimentary stealth elements, and I loved playing it on my CPC. I will therefore be starting this review by taking a look at the Amstrad version because that's the one that I first encountered. The arcade game never made its way to my area, so for me, the CPC was my very first encounter with this game. Let's start with the title screen. It's basic, really basic. You could be forgiven for thinking that they had totally forgotten to make this part of the game, and it's quite possible that they did. The title tune is here, but aside from that, it's bland. The music is good though. Anyway, decide whether you're playing one or two players, decide on whose joystick, whose keyboard, and then move on quickly. At this point, if you're using a cassette like I was back in the 90s, you will need to load the first level. As with almost every major game by the end of the CPC's commercial life, this is a multi-loader, because that's the only way that the developers could keep the CPC competing on the graphics and gameplay front with the Mega Drive and its 16-bit computer counterparts. It doesn't take too long to load each section, however, so it's not that big a problem. Once the level loads, you'll find the game is running in a pretty small window, which helps again to keep the game going at a fast pace and compete with the 16 bits. It's graphically impressive, especially for an 8-bit computer, and the gameplay is all here. I really like this version of the game. It's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend you give it a try. My only gripe is the jump mechanic, because it's hard to get a feel for it. If you're playing on joystick, jumping gets mixed up with firing, and it's a bit of a fiddle to get it to work, which is unfortunate because you really need to be able to jump in order to play this game. You'll get the hang of it eventually though, and I know I did back in the 90s, so it can't be that hard. And after that, it's plain sailing. The Amstrad CPC port is a brilliant version of Bonanza Brothers, so if you have access to an Amstrad, give this one a go. Now let's move on to the original version, released in the arcades in 1990. This looks like it's using either very nicely drawn sprites or some kind of early pre-rendering for the sprites, because at first glance you could be mistaken for thinking this was 3D. It isn't, it's entirely 2D, but it looks pretty nice and it has a lot of character to it. Gameplay wise, it's just the same as the Amstrad CPC port, only with added flair because it's an arcade game. The controls are smooth and responsive, the music is great, the gameplay is top notch, and I love playing it. It's a little more difficult than the CPC version, as the enemy AI is more finely tuned and it's definitely more responsive to what's going on around it, but aside from that, it's a very good game and I'd highly recommend that you give it a try. The bonus stages are fun too. Those weren't in the Amstrad CPC version as far as I could tell, and to be fair, you're not missing much by not having them, but they are fun. The idea here is to collect all the money bags without being spotted in the searchlights. You can hide in doorways to stay out of the way of the searchlights if you need to, but to be honest with you, if you're moving quick enough and you stay alert like I didn't, you'll probably not have to use the doorways at all. All in all, the arcade version of Bonanza Brothers is a very well made, very fun game, and I'd recommend that you give this version a try if you see it out in the wild. Now let's move on, back to the home versions with a look at Bonanza Brothers on Sega's premier console of the era. If there's any machine from the arcade era that's going to be able to handle a near-perfect port of an arcade game, it's the Mega Drive. Sega's flagship console does Bonanza Brothers right. It's colourful, it sounds wonderful, it's fast-paced and all the controls are right there at your fingertips, no messing about. This is a wonderful version of the game, complete with a proper title screen and all the animations. I'm really impressed with this version. I never knew anyone who had a copy of Bonanza Brothers on their Mega Drive back in the day, and I've still never seen a copy around to pick up for my collection, but it's here on the Sega Mega Drive Classics disc for the Xbox One, so I had a chance to play it for a fair amount of time. It's well worth grabbing a copy of that collection and digging into it, because there are 50 games on that disc, and the overwhelming majority are excellent. Anyway, let's get back to the game. Bonanza Brothers plays brilliantly on the Mega Drive, with very responsive controls and excellent graphics. Aside from the fact that the bonus rounds seem to be missing, the Mega Drive port captures the look and feel of the arcade perfectly, and I can't fault it. Definitely give this one a try if you get the chance. The PlayStation 2 version comes to us courtesy of the Sega Classics Collection, which lumps together several of the Japanese-only Sega Ages 2500 budget releases. This version is a 2.5D stealth action game rather than the pseudo 2.5D of the original. Aside from that, it's a near-perfect replica of the arcade version, including enemy placements that make some enemies unavoidable and enemy detection zones that mean that you can't avoid being hit by some enemies. The bomb-throwing robot that attacks you as you zipline to the exit on level 2 is a particularly nasty example. There is no way you can avoid that guy. If you have a copy of the Sega Classics Collection, you should absolutely give this version of the game a try. It's great. Is it as great as the Mega Drive version? Possibly, yeah. It certainly has the bonus levels that I don't remember managing to find on the Mega Drive version, so it's probably closer to the arcade original, and that's pretty nice. I like it. As I mentioned earlier, Bonanza Brothers is one of the Mega Drive games on the Mega Drive Classics disc for Xbox One and PlayStation 4. While it's not the game that sold me on the set, that would be the ability to play Shining in the Darkness and Golden Axe 3, it is one of the games that sealed the deal for me when I read what was in the collection. The Xbox One version runs perfectly, and the game works really well using both the thumbstick and the D-pad, although given that this is the Mega Drive version rather than the arcade, I do recommend using the D-pad, since that is what the game was designed for. If you already have the Sega Mega Drive Classics Collection, give Bonanza Brothers a try, and you'll have hours of fun. If you haven't picked this collection up yet, this is one of the excellent titles that will make it worth your while. In conclusion, Bonanza Brothers is one of those classic Sega arcade games that epitomizes Sega at their best. It's a simple game with simple mechanics, but it's executed flawlessly, and it's a lot of fun as a result. The graphics are bold and inviting, the music is immensely catchy, and the gameplay is easy to get to grips with. I can't fault this game, and I highly recommend that you give it a try. Naturally, the arcade is the best version to play if you get the chance, but the Mega Drive and PlayStation 2 versions are both excellent as well. Plus, they are more likely to be the ones that you can pick up without too much hassle, especially now that the Mega Drive version is out on the Mega Drive Classics set. It definitely makes grabbing this game and playing it for a few rounds almost a no-brainer. Give it a try. And there you see, Bonanza Brothers is an excellent Sega arcade game from back in the day when Sega arcade games were just so good. It's a lot of fun, it's very simple to get into, very simple concept, but that's part of the beauty of these old arcade games because simple to pick up, simple to get to understand, difficult to master. And that's what makes you want to come back and play them again. So I really enjoy this one. I recommend you give it a try if you get the chance, especially now it's out on Xbox One and PlayStation 4, which makes it so easy to pick up the Mega Drive version, which is pretty much the best version on the home computers and consoles. If you get a chance on the arcade, go for it, but Mega Drive, that's the way to go. Okay guys, that's all we've got time for today, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you did like this, and if you did, remember to click that like button, share it with your friends so that they'll know a good game when they see it, and do subscribe for future videos, because there will be more in the future. But until next time, I've been Zoe Kirk-Robinson, you've been watching GameHammer Daily on the Knobmouse channel, and I'll see you tomorrow. If you liked today's video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you.